Hey YouTube, Kiratwi here, bringing you all an update to my Springans Yugioh deck profile for post-Photon Hypernova. With the latest Yu-Gi-Oh! Booster set, we got some new support for the Springans deck, including the new Gigantic Champion Sargus, which can be used for both the Therion and Springans setup. The Springans deck were a deck from the Albaz storyline, a group of machine monsters that could be used to summon out the many different Xyz monsters and then attach themselves from the hand, field, or graveyard onto those monsters, and then gaining additional spells from the newer set to help detach those cards even faster to use all the other different card effects that we have in the deck. Very happy with the results of the deck. The Springans are probably one of my favorite just for like aesthetic from the Albaz storyline for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, so I'm definitely happy to update them. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For the Springans, we are running 3 copies of Springans Kit. Now, for the Springans monsters, we really don't run too many of the variety of different Springans monsters. Springans Kit is one of the only 3Os we run in the deck, just for its easy special summon with this card. If you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material on your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. If it's normal or special summon, you can add to your hand one of your branded spell traps that is banished or in the deck or graveyard. You mostly use Kit to special summon herself out onto the field to then give you access to some easy cards to summon out cards like your Springans Merrymaker onto the field. I also run 2 copies of Springans Brothers. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target one Springans monster in your graveyard except for Brothers and special summon it in defense position. If this card is in your hand, field, or graveyard, you can target one Springans Xyz monster you control, attach this card to its material. Now you'll see this attach card effect in a good number of the different Springans monsters. It just helps to increase the number of Xyz material for you to use for your many different Springans monsters that will summon in the deck. Along with Springans Brothers, we're also running 2 copies of Springans Bronga. If this card's in your hand, field, or graveyard, you can target a Springans Xyz monster and attach it onto it as material. You can banish this card and one Springans monster with a different name from your graveyard to add one Springans card from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Bronga once per turn, so there are plenty of different spell cards like Tally Ho Springans, Springans Booty, and also Springans Watch, all very good spells to add to our hand to set up our main go-to field spell, which is also reliant for a lot of the cards we run in the deck, the Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda. So this banish will come in handy for that search. I also run 1 copy of Springans Pador, 1 Springans Rocky, and 1 Captain Sargus. The Pador tributes to target a Springan in your graveyard, except Pador and special summon it. Rocky gives you more of an option with its normal special summon to target a Great Sand Sea Golden Golganga or Springans monster in your graveyard, except for Rocky, and add to your hand. And Sargus as another attach option, and then boosted attack power for one of your Springans Xyz monsters. All one of text though. The Pador has to already have the monster in the graveyard, and Rocky is just a recycle for those other ones as well. I also run 2 copies of the Supreme Sovereign Serpent of Golgonda. If the field spell is on the field, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. And also, while it's on the field, the original attack of this card becomes 3,000. So with this card, you have a pretty big boss monster, but also another level 8 monster that you can even just set up in the graveyard with some of these spells that we run for more additional draw power or one of the other ones. And with it, if you use it for an Xyz play, it won't be banished because when you detach material off of an Xyz monster, they just end up going to the graveyard and not being banished to begin with. I also run 1 copy of Fallen of Albaz for the additional fusion search to get a fusion on the field, whether it be our Sprin, the Iron Dash Dragon, or using an extra deck monster, and then going into cards like Mirror Jade, we have that fusion monster as well to then work with cards like our Springans Kit to special summon onto the field. If you want to run additional copies of Fallen of Albaz, you can always take out some of your other hand trap options that we're running in the deck. I also run 1 Cyberstein just as another way to fusion summon much more easily onto the field. You don't really use life points for anything in this deck, so just having that as also a machine monster, which can be searched with just 2 level 4 monsters to make our Gear Gigan X as a search to summon this card out onto the field. And then the last of the main deck monsters, just 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. When having that hand shutdown of your opponent's plays, being able to stop either their graveyard setup or searching any cards to their hand. If you wanted to add additional copies of Fallen of Albaz, you can either take out the Cyberstein or remove any of the copies of Ash Blossom for additional copies of those cards. Moving on now to the spells from the Photon Hypernova set. We're running 3 of the new Tally-Ho Springans. When you activate this card, you can also detach up to 3 materials from monsters you control. Add 1 Springans monster from your deck to your hand. Then if you detach any materials at activation, you can special summon that many Springans monsters from your hand or graveyard. During your main phase, if this card's in your graveyard, you can target 1 Xyz monster on the field, detach 1 material from it, and if you do, add this card to your hand. You can only use 1 Tally-Ho Springans effect per turn, and only once that turn. So it is a quick play spell, so you could use it on your opponent's turn, just having that Xyz monster on the field, and then that resource, if you detach off of that monster, can give you at least more special summons to go into a different Springans extra deck monster, depending on what was on that monster. Because if you have a level 4 monster attached to a rank 8, you can always just detach it, then special summon it, and some other additional Springans monsters to then overlay into the rank 4 monster instead, if you had it. So great quick play spell that definitely does help with the certain setup for the Springans deck. I also run 3 copies of Springans Booty. If a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls. Neither player can activate that effect monster's effects on this field while this turn, and you can send this face-up card to the graveyard to activate 1 Great Sansi Gold Golgonda directly from your deck or graveyard. You can only use this effect of Springans Booty once per turn, but being able to go for your field spell that much more quickly is important, but also more of a way to stop your opponent's monsters in any more card effects of monsters with the same name for that turn. I also run 3 copies of Springans Watch, just another searcher for your Great Sansi Gold Golgonda. You add 1 from your deck to your hand if it's already on the field zone. You can apply this effect instead. You can add a Springans monster from your deck to your hand and send 1 Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. This will set up the 1 in the graveyard for you to use and give you the 1 additional 1 in your hand. So you can add some of the 1-ofs like Springans Fedor to your hand, set up the other graveyard 1 to special summon onto the field, and then go for the particular Springans Xyz monster from your extra deck. Now for the Great Sansi of Gold Golgonda, you can mix and match the numbers of the field spell with Decisive Battle of Golgonda. This continuous spell always becomes Great Sansi Gold Golgonda while in the field or in the graveyard. Once per turn, if you control a monster or a card that would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send 1 fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck to the graveyard instead. And during the end phase, if you have Fallen of Albaz on your field or graveyard, you can special summon 1 Springans monster from your hand or deck. You can only use this effect of Golgonda once per turn. And then the original field spell, all Springans Xyz monsters gain 1000 attack. You can only use each of the following effects of Great Sansi Gold Golgonda once per turn. If you control no Springans Xyz monsters, you can discard 1 Springans card, special summon 1 Springans Xyz monster from your extra deck. If a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, except during the damage step, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls. It cannot attack for the rest of this turn. So even if not going for the actual Xyz play, this is your main go-to way for you to summon out your Springans Xyz monsters, and then just use the main deck effect monsters that we spoke of before to attach onto those monsters with each one of their additional card effects. For more of the generic cards in the deck, I run 2 copies of Trade-In, just more draw power to get to the cards we need using the level 8 monsters, which we can set up in the graveyard, which while the Golden Sea Golgonda is on the field, you can just special summon them right back onto the field. And for the 1-ofs for the spells, 1 copy of Terraforming, 1 Monster Reborn, and 1 Extra Foolish Burial as an added option to send cards from our extra deck to the graveyard for us to then utilize our Springans Kit special summon. And then for the traps, I run 2 copies of Springans Interluder. When your opponent activates a card or effect, you can return 1 Springans Xyz monster you control to the extra deck, then apply 1 of these effects, negate that activated effect, or special summon 1 level 8 monster from your graveyard. It says level 8 monster, so you're not limited to Springans monsters. So you can even summon out your Supreme Sovereign, Serpent of Golgonda, just a 3k beater on the field, using this card. And if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by a card effect, you can make all monsters your opponent currently control lose 1000 attack until the end of this turn. So just another way to get some of your powerhouses over your opponent's own monsters with this card. With the last of the traps in the main deck being 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, just like the Ash Blossom play, just another hand trap to use, because a lot of the plays in this deck can just revolve around 1 card, so having a good number of hand traps to stop our opponent always will come in handy. Moving on now to the extra deck. For the Springans monsters, I run 2 copies of Springans Ship Explorer. Well, you need 2 or more level 8 monsters. You can choose 1 of your opponent's monster zones or spell and trap card zones, detach any number of materials from this card, and destroy the same number of cards your opponent controls in the chosen zone or in its adjacent monster zones and spell and trap card zones. During your opponent's main phase or battle phase, quick effect, you can banish this card until the end phase. So you can only use this effect of Springans Ship Explorer once per turn. So it gets the option for you to remove the detached materials off of it, also being able to just destroy a good chunk of your opponent's field with it. And with your field spell, you can easily summon it onto the field just for a discard and then set up all the Exceeds material on it using your different Springans monsters. I also run 2 copies of Springans Merrymaker, the rank 4 monster. If it's special summoned from your extra deck, you can send one Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. That'll set it up in the graveyard for you to then attach onto this monster. And during your opponent's main phase or battle phase, quick effect, you can banish this card until the end phase. Then if you banish this card with 2 or more Exceeds material, you can also send one fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard that lists Fallen of Albaz as material, setting up those monsters once again in the graveyard for you to use with some of your other cards that we run in the deck. I also run the Gigantic Champion Sargus as another option to attach onto a Springans monster. Then you just attach and transfer the material onto this card as well. While it has material, you can add one Springans or Therian card from your deck to your hand. If material is detached from a monster on the field except during the damage step, you can target a card in the field and either destroy it or return it to the hand. So if you use this card with your Tally-Ho Springans, along with the detached to get the special summon plays with Tally-Ho Springans, you'll get the additional return or destruction thanks to your Gigantic Champion Sargus on the field. And for more of the generic Exceeds, 1 number 97, Dragluvion, 1 number 68, 1 number 38, and also 1 Zeus for the bigger rank Exceeds monsters. For the lower ones, the 1 Gear Gigan X, for the Cyberstein Search, the 1 Exiton Knight, and the 1 Baguska for all of the Exceeds monsters. And then for the fusion monsters, we run 2 copies of Sprin the Iron Dash Dragon, just needing a Fallen of Albaz and 1 effect monster, special summon this turn, and the 1 Mirror Jade to use more of the extra deck summons for summoning this card out onto the field. As for some of your go-to plays in the deck, like I said before, they all still revolve pretty strongly around the Great Sand Sea Golganda field spell. All Springans Exceeds monsters gain the 1000 attack. If you control no Springans Exceeds monsters, you can discard 1 card to special summon 1 from your extra deck. So most of your Springans will have the option for attaching onto it. So all you have to do is detach 1 from the card. And then with that, for the discard, you can special summon your Springans monster. You can then special summon out your Springans Merrymaker. If it's special summoned from the extra deck, you can send 1 Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. So that with that, you'll send 1 additional one to the graveyard. And then with both Bronga and Brothers in your graveyard, you can target a Springans monster and then attach that monster onto it as material, giving you the 2 Exceeds material needed for your Springans Merrymaker. And then you can banish this card till the end phase, or you can then use this play to go into the additional rank up that you may want with your 1 card on the field, or you could even use, with the attached material now, your Tally-Ho Springan. When you activate this card, you can detach up to 3 material from your card on the field. So with the 2, you just detach off of this to add 1 Springan monster from your deck to your hand. And then also you can special summon that many Springan monsters from your hand or graveyard. And with that play, you can add your Springans kit to your hand and then special summon the other 2 back onto the field. With that, you still have a normal summon to use as well, so you can summon out your Springans kit and then use that overlay to go into 1 additional Springans monster. With the 2 monsters chosen here being level 4, you could have always gone for a rank 8 play if the other additional monster that we sent to the graveyard was instead cards like Captain Sargus, because then those 2 monsters would be on the field and we could use the 2 of them for the overlay. But since we have the 2 level 4s for the 1 additional normal summon as well, we can go into another Merrymaker and then have the banish play for the 1 Merrymaker we have on the field, which this card just helps with so much of that setup. And then if it's in your graveyard, you can target and Exceeds this monster on the field to detach 1 and then add it back to your hand, meaning you might want to use Tally-Ho on your opponent's turn. Like I said, for the detach and special summon, you'll just miss out on the extra deck play if you do so. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. It's a really awesome deck. Like I said, the Albaz lineup Springans are probably my favorite deck, lore-wise and just aesthetic-wise as well, with their machine theme that they go for. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira Twig out.